What is functional health?
And so I figured out what specific nutrients I needed to take to kind of balance out, if you will, my brain chemistry. In my experience, I find that a lot of dog owners are very anxious.
Would you say genetics is affecting you from your parents or grandparents as well?
I've got a golden doodle. I love sweet, calm, smart dogs, and so I'm absolutely in love with a golden doodle. Even with weight gain and fatigue that could be coming from certain genetic variants. The nutrients we're talking about are very specific. They change the configuration of the enzyme that you've inherited. You are a unique individual, and what is going to be best for you is very specific.
Hello, dog lovers. My name is Saro. I'm a dog trainer, also coach dog owners, and in today's podcast, I have Dr. J. Dunn. She's an expert in natural healthcare, genetic, biochemistry, mental health, and nutrition. Dr. J, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation, Saro. It's nice to meet with you and get to chat with you.
Sure. Before we get started, can you kind of talk about how did you get to where you are today, and what do you do especially, and a little bit of bio of yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm a chiropractic physician. I practiced for 35 years in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and gradually kind of veered off into genetics and biochemistry. It's kind of a long story, but I just felt like there was a piece of the health puzzle missing. And so I kind of veered off into understanding genetics and the genetic causes of various health conditions, and kind of stumbled across some pretty fascinating information about mental health that was affected by genetics. And so that led me down a whole other kind of rabbit hole. And I think you watched maybe some of the videos about that, and I'd be glad to chat more about that.
Sure, yeah. So as you may know, or also my viewers know, this year my focus is to improve dog owners' health and well-being. And this is why I have invited you to enlighten us about, health. And I know you cover most areas of our health. And first question is, we hear this term functional health. Let's start with that. What is functional health?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think there's a lot of confusion in people's minds. There are different types of healthcare that we call allopathic, sort of the traditional medical healthcare that we think about when we go to our primary care physician or our ER. Natural medicine kind of veers off, and we look at, instead of looking at taking a drug for a particular condition with natural healthcare, they would look at doing natural alternatives to that. But even further, functional medicine looks at, why did you have that health condition in the first place? And so it goes deeper into real causes. Is it something you're eating, something you're drinking, something you're doing in your life? Is it stress? Is it toxicity? Is it an infection? So they look at things sort of on that level rather than trying to cover up symptoms. And then, that's what I was doing for many years. I studied at the Institute for Functional Medicine and used that type of medicine. But then when I discovered an even deeper cause was kind of in that genetic realm that I mentioned.
So what's the difference between, let's say, traditional health, Western health, and alternative health, and functional health? So we have all these.
Right, yeah. And now, kind of introducing now sort of the genetic level and deeper into causes than ever before, and so instead of asking, for myself in particular, I was suffered from depression for most of my life and fatigue, and couldn't figure it out. I could take some herbs and things to make myself feel better. When I got into functional medicine, realized I had an Epstein-Barr virus, and I thought maybe that was causing it. But then when I finally got into kind of the genetic realm, what I realized was I had inherited certain genetic variants that don't let me fight viruses. And so that was, an even deeper level of understanding where these imbalances come from. So it's fascinating when we get into that realm. And to kind of bring it back to your topics, you're trying to appeal and talk to dog owners, which I am one. I'm a passionate dog owner, and I see people's mental health issues kind of translate to the dogs, because dogs are, as you know, super sensitive,
Right.
and they'll pick up on your, especially your anxiety or irritability or even depression. And so I think it's great that you're starting with looking at those kind of things with people, because that's really where it has to start. When we look at the behavior of dogs, we have to look at the behavior of the owners, and what's happening with them.
Yeah, definitely. So it was something personal that motivated you to get into this field, right?
Yeah, definitely. I was looking for answers to my own health issues. And after practicing for over 30 years and looking for why am I depressed all the time? What's going on with me? And sort of blaming myself for having a bad attitude. Why don't I just think happy thoughts? And people will tell me that, just be cheerful, just put a smile on your face, and and that'll get rid of it. It's like that doesn't work. And if you've ever suffered from any kind of depression, that doesn't work. Just, trying to think the way, or change the way you think. And then, so when I got into the whole genetic realm and looked at things from that perspective, I ran across, I got my genes tested, and one of the genetic variants that it turned out I had inherited was the vitamin D receptor variant. And so just to give you a little background about genetics, you get one set of genes from mom, one set of genes from dad. Those genes are a blueprint for telling your body how to do certain things. So in this case, the genes that would tell my body how to make a receptor for vitamin D, they didn't work right. And so I got the wrong code basically from both parents. And I couldn't absorb vitamin D. And vitamin D, it turns out, is critical for a lot of different things. And one of them is creating neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. And those are our kind of like our happy neurotransmitters, or happy hormones. And the other thing that vitamin D does is fire up your immune system. And so all in one genetic variant, I got the answers to some questions that had been plaguing me for a long, long time. And that was, the chronic fatigue syndrome, where I couldn't get on top of like the Epstein-Barr virus that was causing it. And also my brain just could not make dopamine and serotonin correctly. And then I figured out, so, okay, well, sucks to be you, or can we do something about that? And that's a new science that we call nutrigenomics. We can use certain nutrients to kind of upregulate the function of those enzymes that we may have inherited, variants on, and kind of make up for the fact that we have genetic variants that are causing a problem. And so I figured out what specific nutrients I needed to take to kind of balance out, if you will, my brain chemistry and my biochemistry. And then when I started taking those, it just changed my life. And, it was like, oh my gosh, I think this is happy. I had never felt it. And my Epstein-Barr virus went away, because now my immune system is working like it's supposed to. So it was very life-changing for me. And then I started to look at, okay, well, what about these patients that I've had? And I had a very successful practice in New Mexico. But there were certain people that didn't respond the same way that others did. And so I thought, well, maybe it's genetic with them too. And so I started to look at my patients that way. Let's get their genes tested. Let's look at where do we need to make up for these genetic variants. And it was stunning. The results I started to get were just stunning, especially in the mental health area, but in other areas as well. In detoxification, in how we break down histamine, and how we make energy, and how we make neurotransmitters, like I say, and just every area that you can think of. Essentially, we were getting down into a much deeper cause of where a lot of our imbalances come from.
That's amazing. To be honest with you, I haven't heard that term and that part so far, and you're the first one who's actually talking about it, I think, and explaining all this. So for me, it's new. I'm sure it's new for everybody else. I want to dig in a little bit deeper into that and find out a little bit more about genetics. We'll talk about that more. So it's fascinating that you were able to find solution and you change your own life with that, and now you're spreading the message to others, which is a great goal to have in life anyways. But so let's say, as you mentioned, as a dog owner, I find dog owners, just like dogs, are very sensitive individuals overall. I think I feel that dogs overall, they're very sensitive creatures, and when a dog owner is starting to become a dog owner, it feels the notion, it feels the need of having a dog and choosing a dog and selecting the breed and all that and bringing the dog home. They're kind of, as you said, they're matching together and feeding off each other. So they are in a way the same. We are feeling the same emotions as dogs feel. So I feel that, as a dog owner myself, I'm very sensitive to, as my dogs are, and I'm very connected to them. And my goal is to help dog owners to connect to their dogs in deeper level as well. And this is a good start there as well. So let's say, as a dog owner myself, I want to improve my own health. What would be the basics of getting started to improve my life? From health.
That's it. There was a lot to unpack there. That was in my experience, I find that a lot of dog owners are very anxious. They're uptight and they're trying to walk their dog, but they're scared of everything, and their dog is going, "Oh, my owner's afraid. I'm going to be afraid. And I'll protect them." And especially, I'm sorry to say it, but little dogs.
For sure. Yeah.
Big dogs can be that way too, but I find that, I don't know, anxious people seem to gravitate toward little dogs for some reason. And then the dog becomes kind of aggressive because they're trying to protect their owner because their owner's afraid, right? And I feel like, to answer your question, there's a particular genetic variant called the COMT, which is, it's called the catechol-O-methyltransferase, and its job is to break down adrenaline. And if you know anything about adrenaline is your fight or flight, your stress response in the body. And so if you have a genetic variant where you can't break down that adrenaline, then you're going to be in this state of anxiety all the time. And again, your dog is going to pick up on that. But there are things you can do if you get your genes tested. And we design it with my HappyGenes, with the company that I started. We design a diet and a lifestyle and supplementation that helps balance that out. And so we give you, suggestions on, how to eat correctly. And then, of course, what supplements to take that help break down adrenaline out of your body. So I would say, this is, it's kind of goes hand in hand with, your philosophy about dogs. It's just kind of an extension of us. When somebody has that genetic variant, they're often very anxious, and getting a dog is comforting because they're like, I want somebody to hold and calm me down and be an emotional support kind of thing. Poor dog, because they're like,
Yes, they're all of a sudden they're overwhelmed with all these duties now.
Right. Yeah. Now, they have a job. They have to calm you down and take care of you when you should be taking care of them, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So if you get calmed down, then the dog starts to relax too. They go, "Oh wow, mom or dad is just chill. I can relax now, and I don't have to take care of everybody and make everybody calm. I can be calm too." It's just that leash, goes right down into the dog's physiology. Right. And it's fascinating.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, we can figure out what is the right diet or right food for you.
Mhm.
What would you say, in general, are things that we should avoid in our lives?
Well, that's the thing is it's very specific. So each of
Mm,
us is individual, and it's been fascinating to do the genetic work because everybody that I test, I go, wow, you need to stay away from turmeric and green tea, or you need to do intermittent fasting, or, nightshades are not good for you, or lactose isn't good for you, or gluten is bad, or carbohydrates are your best food, or protein is your best. It's so individual. So
mm, mm,
there is no one size fits all except drink water, and
mm.
um, so it's just so individual, and that's been the fascinating thing is a lot of people say, oh, everybody should eat the keto diet, or everybody
Mm,
do low carb, or
yeah.
the carnivore diet, and it's just not that way. So you are a unique individual, and what is going to be best for you is very specific for you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So let's talk about then genetics. That it how would you again maybe elaborate a little bit more how genetics can affect our lives, our health, well-being, the way we act or behave or anything like that. Yeah, just let's
Yeah,
dive into that. Yeah.
it's fascinating. Again, we've mentioned a couple of them, that the VDR, the vitamin D receptor, really kind of leads to low mood because you can't make neurotransmitters correctly. The COMT tends to make people anxious, and ADD, they can't focus and pay attention well. There's another genetic variant called the MAO gene that is involved in breaking down serotonin. And when you have a genetic variant there, it's going to increase your irritability. So serotonin, if it's too high, makes you irritable and anxious, and a bit ADD too. And then you can combine those. So imagine that you are irritable and anxious, and that leads to kind of an OCD behavior where you have to have everything just so. And there are genes that are involved in things like entrepreneurial tendencies. If you have certain genetic variants, like the DRD3 is one, it'll lead you to be sort of entrepreneurial, and not necessarily like you got to start a business, but you're always thinking of a better way to do things, or thinking outside the box, or trying to come up with new solutions, or you don't follow recipes well. You want to add in a little cinnamon and a little, you know,
Mm,
it keeps you always kind of innovating, essentially. There are genes for addiction, your tendency to be an alcoholic, or to be addicted to smoking or drugs. And opioids, especially.
mm,
There are certain genetic variants that can increase your risk of those things happening. There are genes for bipolar, schizophrenia, even, the really bad psychiatric conditions. There are some genetic variants that can contribute to it. And that's not to say that our environment has no effect on it. It very much does. And your upbringing and your exposure to traumas, that can definitely increase these psychiatric conditions. But if you have that underlying sort of genetic risk, it makes you even more susceptible to those things. But it colors your personality. And so for me, I inherited the VDR, but also the MAO gene, which is again the warrior gene. And so if I don't take my supplements, I get a little irritable, and I catch myself going, why am I getting upset about that? That's dumb. And I go, oh, wow, it's my biochemistry, not my personality. And so when I get back on my supplement regimen, that irritability goes. So it's fascinating. This, again, what you mentioned was, this is new thinking, and it really is. It's fascinating how much genetics can color your personality, but also the fact that you can work with it and you can change your personality. I've seen some dramatic changes in people's personalities, from irritable, grouchy person to nice and calm, from anxious and, kind of like worried all the time to just relaxed and content.
mm,
And and some fascinating case studies on addictions like methamphetamines and alcohol and cocaine. I've seen people just stop doing those things when we get their brain balanced. So it's just fascinating, and this is brand new. It's a paradigm shift, but I'm telling you, it's really at the core of a lot of these kind of conditions. But not just those, also just your energy levels, how well you make energy out of your food, your metabolism, how much energy you have and how much can you control your weight. Some people have inherited genetic variants that cause them to gain weight easily and be tired. And we can work with that. I can show them where that is, which is comforting, for a lot of people who blame themselves for being lazy or, being tired all the time or not being able to exercise. There are genetic variants that actually contribute to that. So it's what I call compassion, genetic compassion, really understanding the genes you've inherited and their effect on your personality and your physiology.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago, there was this concept that was kind of thrown around that genetics is not real cause of certain health issues or anything like that. But I think now you're discovering that actually it does. And how much would you say? Is it like more than 50% or less than that is affecting us?
Well, it really depends on what you're talking about. So if it's mental health stuff, I'd say 70. Wow. If it's cancer, I would say less. It's 30 to 50%. And, again, all diet, lifestyle, and other factors are going to turn genes on or turn genes off. And so, yeah, it just varies. And there's no like one gene, one issue. It's not ever that way. It's always about, okay, this slows down the physiology here, and this list of genes makes you susceptible to cancer or heart disease. Again, we don't look at just one. And so that's what's real different about our program, my HappyGenes program, is that we look at the interplay of all of those genes. And then we ask you, what symptoms are you having? And so if you have, the genes that make you susceptible for a certain condition and you have that condition, then we know that it's likely that it's coming from a genetic list of genes that you have inherited. And so we can work with that. We go, okay, well, we're going to design a diet around this, that interplay of genes. And your supplements are going to focus on, again, that interplay, not just one, you have this gene, you should take this. And it's just never that way. And a lot of companies are doing that. And it just makes me a little irritable because it's reducing genes to like, oh, you have the BRCA gene, you're going to get breast cancer. And that's just not true. I think we try to reduce that information into something we can understand.
Right.
And I get that desire to do that, but it's not simple. So you kind of have to look at sort of the whole picture and then the interplay. So
would you say genetics is affecting you from your parents or grandparents as well? And, maybe way back?
Yeah. That's another fascinating thing. It's they're epigenetic markers, or what we call methylation markers, on your genes. And so you could actually inherit trauma from parents and grandparents that kind of make you react to things that you don't understand why. So for instance, they did a study where they took 2 rats and they exposed one of them to shock every time it smelled a certain smell, let's say lavender, and the other one, they just had it smell lavender. And the next generation, so these rats had kids, and every time they smelled lavender, they would go into a stress response, even though they'd never been subjected to the shock. And grandkids also would react to lavender like in a fight or flight kind of reaction or stress reaction. So you can actually, you may react to things and you don't understand it. It could very well be like in your DNA and in your physiology from inherited from parents.
Right. I know I've read this study as well that let's say some people of our population who has let's say experienced the World War I or II, the kids and children of those families are kind of still experiencing trauma, even though they haven't been in that situation themselves.
Yeah, very much so. And I've worked on some patients, children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors.
Right.
And it's fascinating to see the trauma that's still in their bodies from those experiences. It's really interesting. Yeah. And, the other thing that happens, when you think about like the people that survived during times of famine, like in the potato famine in Ireland, people that survived were the ones that were able to hold on to calories, that were able to gain weight easily and hold on to it. And so, all the skinny people are, they didn't make it. And so the people that survived are the ones that, pass those genes on that allow them to hold on to weight easily and gain weight easily, which is not very fun today because we have calories.
Right.
It can be very frustrating. It allowed their ancestors to survive, but it's kind of a detriment to current day kind of.
Interesting. And interestingly, few years ago, I came across this study as well that has been done, and some I would say holistic vets, they were talking about it, that aggression in dogs, for example, there is a part that is also genetic that it is affecting them to become aggressive. There is as you say, there's something in their gene that, yes, we have a dog who's aggressive and we're trying to solve it, but there is that piece that could be genetic, that it's causing your dog to become aggressive. And now it's making sense that you're explaining this. And I'm getting a little bit better of understanding aggression myself as a dog trainer in dogs. And I think the same way applies to humans too. Aggression, we name aggression in dogs, but it's just trauma.
Yeah, no, I think about that a lot, Saro, because I've got a golden doodle.
Golden doodles are the most fun dogs ever. Oh my goodness! Yes.
And he's a total comp. He's ADD. He's all over the place, but he's super loving, super smart.
Yeah.
And I also have a pit bull mix who is like easily irritated and can get aggressive, but he was also abused as a puppy. And so but I, it's the old adage that genes load the gun and the environment pulls the trigger.
Right.
But pit bull, well, they can either go really, really great sweet dogs, but they can also turn into some of the most vicious.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it depends on their upbringing, but there's still that underlying hint of like, I don't really trust this dog.
Yeah. I think first of all, the breed is very effective part of a dog's behavior. For instance, golden retrievers are known to be, and they are the gentlest breed of the dogs. And like your golden doodle that you're saying that you have, it's a mix of a golden and poodle, and goldens are very friendly, outgoing, loving breed. And then we got poodles who, in my opinion, I call them one of the Einstein dogs. More of a they're very intelligent, very easy to train, fast to learn dogs. And you mix these two, so now you have as a dog owner, you have both kind of a both world of having a dog who's easy to live with, but there are breeds like, as you said, pit bulls or bulls in general. They tend to be a little bit, bred for different reasons and originally, and now we're trying to fix that problem. There are some breeders who are trying to breed gentle pit bulls, which is it's kind of hard to do it because it's in the breed and it's in the
Right.
gene.
Yeah, no, they were bred for protection, and to fight and fighting.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why insurance companies ask you, do you have a pit bull or a,
Right. Yeah.
Rottweiler, or they high incidence of kind of traumas with those kind of.
Yeah, and that is the thing that I think most you're experiencing and most dog owners are experiencing, as you're saying. For example, my pit bull is not predictable, right?
Yeah.
You never know what's going to happen, and all these things. Even your golden doodle, even though it's the sweetest things, you're saying it has some other issues, right? Uh, Everybody is dealing with a challenge with their dogs, and I think I would love to hear your opinion about this. Like myself, also, I have, although I'm a dog trainer, I have dogs who have issues, and that's one of the parts that, as a dog trainer, I'm trying to teach dog owners that it's not your fault per se, that your dog is behaving certain way, but understanding your dog, understanding your part in that relationship can make a big difference. And I would love you to talk about the mental health part of a dog owner or humans nowadays, that we do face challenges, and how do we go around that? How do we solve those?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there, but well, I think it goes both ways. When I had a black lab before I had this golden doodle, and he was a spaz. He was a COMT. It was classic COMT. Totally anxious about everything. Not aggressive at all, but just like no focus. Really hard to train him, and just like squirrel.
Right.
But I started giving him certain nutrients that kind of balance out that COMT, and it really calmed down his nervous system. So you can work with them the same way you can work with the owners. And so why we pick a certain dog too, I think is important. I love big dogs because I can get my arms around them, and I love sweet, calm, smart dogs. And so I'm absolutely in love with a golden doodle. To me, it's the perfect dog, but other people are going to want different breeds, and it's interesting to see how picking a breed kind of like reflects on your personality. And so it's often similar. So if you're nervous, you're going to pick a nervous dog. It's like you go together. So if you work on both ends of that, work on your own physiology, knowing that you're anxious and you picked a nervous breed, and you're making them more nervous by your behavior, you can work on both of your nutrients levels and diet, that kind of balance those out. And so it would be fascinating to do some genetic testing on dogs in this way, so that we could what their brain chemistry makeup was, through the genes. I've not done that, but that would be very cool.
Okay, that was my next question. That is it possible to test dogs as well?
I've not done it. I should ask my lab and see if we could do that. That would be really very cool.
Yeah.
I can predict when I look at a dog, I can tell you pretty much, at least in the brain chemistry area, what's going on with it, and then give some suggestions on that. But I'll have to look into that.
Yeah. So would you say, like, it's not only a matter of if you're, let's say, hyper or anything, but maybe if you're nervous, or if you're not confident, or you're shy, and all of those, I believe there are over 75 5. Nowadays, I think there's over 100 behaviors that they have come up with. Humans do behave, and some of them are good, some of them are positive, some of them negative, and all that. But you can control all that, right? And would you say the best solution for those, once you figure out the problem, would be the nutrition and supplement?
Yeah, it just makes the biggest impact. We tell you about what diet to do, what things may be making the condition worse, or what to do to kind of help it as far as lifestyle. Mm-hmm. But the biggest impact that we see is actually in supplementation. Mm-hmm. For me, especially, when I talked about the vitamin D receptor variant, it doesn't matter how much vitamin D I got in my diet or how much vitamin D I got from the sun, I couldn't absorb it. And so that took some very specific nutrients to kind of change that. What happens is we have like an enzyme, and this is what we call the substrate that fits into that enzyme. It's a lock and key kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so for me, my enzyme, my receptor is closed. I can't get D in there. It doesn't fit. And then when you take the cofactors, it opens up the receptor, and then suddenly the D fits in there. And then all these things can happen in the body. And so the nutrients we're talking about are very specific. They change the configuration of the enzyme that you've inherited. So if you, backing up a little bit, so you get one gene from mom, one gene from dad, that's your code, again, for making an enzyme in the body or a receptor. If your mother gave you, or your father, one of your parents gave you the wrong code, then that's what we call a heterozygous variant. So it'll affect that enzyme a little bit. But if both parents give you that wrong code, that's what we call homozygous, and it can affect the ability of that enzyme to work by about 70%, reduces the ability for it to function by about 70%. So that's really hard to make up for with just diet alone, to be honest. Mm-hmm. So we have found that really specific targeted nutrition, again, changes that configuration of the enzyme so that now the substrate that's supposed to fit in there can fit in there. And that's the magic, And so it's not just like, oh, we're changing the expression of a gene. No, we're not. We're changing how that gene, the enzyme that's coded by that gene, we're upregulating that enzyme, despite the fact that you've inherited a variant there. We're cheating. We're kind of doing and run around your genetics, and then allowing that enzyme to kind of work better through very specific nutrients. And so those are called cofactors and coenzymes, and they're vitamins and minerals. They're specific. So you can't just say, oh, I'm going to go out and take a multivitamin just to cover all the bases. It won't work because it may have too much of one thing and not enough of another. For you, it's going to be designed very specifically. Like you need more selenium and less zinc, or you need more magnesium and less manganese, or you need more B12 but no folic acid, or you have to kind of design it specifically around your genes for it to really work. And that's the fascinating thing. Is the specificity of it, and then it just turns on the physiology and gets it working like it's supposed to, which is very cool.
Interesting. And the reason why we lack nutrients and we're in need of supplements is what?
Well, that's a legitimate question. It's not like, well, you can have deficiencies, yes, and that's another topic. Our soils are very deficient in a lot, and especially selenium is one of the ones that is the worst. But this is talking about a need for a much higher level of a specific nutrient than somebody without that genetic variant. And so it's more than just a deficiency. It is targeted what we call nutrigenomics to your genes. So to make up for that 70% reduced ability to absorb it, we have to do something a little more heroic there. So for me, the coenzymes for vitamin D are K2 and A, and then it opens up that receptor, and then boom, the D can get in. So that's the science that we're working with. And so for there's an enzyme called the GAD enzyme that converts glutamate into GABA. And GABA is our calming neurotransmitter. So glutamate is an anxiety-producing one. It's selenium dependent. So for a person who has a genetic variant there, they need a much higher level of selenium than somebody without that genetic variant. So it could be 3 to 4 times the normal RDA, or required daily allowance, for them, in that one particular nutrient. And so when they start to take that, their body calms down and makes GABA. And so that's the way we look at these genetic variants: is what enzymes are they affecting, and how do we make up for that with a very specific targeted nutrient that opens the enzyme up and allows it to work better. That makes sense?
Yes. I'm assuming my parents and my grandparents and grandparents also, they were lacking nutrients. And
yeah, you got the genes from somewhere.
Yeah. As we are diving into our next generation, what are some of the discoveries that you have figured out lately, or learned lately, that you're looking forward to it in the future?
Well, really good question, because there's a lot you can do to change, especially if you're of childbearing age. There's a lot you can do to kind of change the outcomes for your children and their grandchildren. And one of them is through a concept called methylation. And, we already know this concept because we tell pregnant women to take folic acid to prevent birth defects, right? Neural tube defects. A lot of pediatricians go, oh, you got to take your multivitamin, make sure you get folic acid, because it keeps certain genes from expressing. So the methyl groups that we make through B12 and folic acid cover up a gene and keep it from expressing. So it keeps it from expressing cancer, or from expressing a birth defect, or a susceptibility to diabetes, or weight problems in the future. So one of the best ways to give a gift to your next generation and the further generations down the line is to get your methylation patterns tested and balanced out nutritionally when you're pregnant, before, during, and after being pregnant. And that gift is lifelong. If you turn off the expression of a gene, it's turned off for the life of that child. And so really interesting study done with agouti mice, where they took 2 mice, and one of them, they're clones, they're identical in their genes. One of them, they fed methyl groups these nutrients, and the other one they did not. And the offspring of these 2, the one that was fed methyl groups, were thin and had energy and no birth defects, and the ones that were not fed methyl groups had a high incidence of diabetes and weight gain and birth defects as well. And so it's fascinating to see the difference when you get methylation on board and you get it correct. That, again, that's a lifetime of not having to struggle with those health issues of cancer and heart disease and diabetes and of course, birth defects that you've inherited. So it's very fascinating. And so it's very exciting. It's an exciting breakthrough in understanding, genetics and this is epigenetics at its finest. And, again, your genes aren't going to change. You inherit your genes, but the ability to turn them off and on comes about through this concept of epigenetics, where we can turn off the expression of the bad genes and turn on the expression of the good genes.
Amazing, interesting. So what tests would you say is good to take now to figure out what's happening in your body?
Well, of course, I'm going to recommend my HappyGenes, which is the company that I started. 23andMe and Ancestry and some of the over-the-counter companies are mainly focused on where did you come from, and they only test a small subset of genes, and we like 20 to 30,000, and we test 675,000 in our report, and we're looking at more in the realm of the biochemistry in your body? How well do you detox? How well do you methylate? How well do you make neurotransmitters? How well do you break them down? That's where we excel, and we're the only company that's really doing that. And so I would have to say, if you're interested in that aspect of it, My HappyGenes is the place to go. If you're just wanting to know where you come from, you can use some of the other over-the-counter testing. We don't really do that. So,
what do you get in the results of the test? Some of the highlights.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So once you get your genes tested and we get the results back, and by the way, it's super anonymous. There's no way that the lab has any information about you. It's only tracked by a barcode. So they never know your name. No information about you goes to the lab, and that sample is destroyed after 3 months. We're pretty adamant about that because some of the companies are selling your data when you get tested by them. So we get that data back, and it's deposited into your account, and immediately you get a mood and personality report. It's included with the price of the DNA testing. And that's the first place to start. And it's really fascinating to see, why you are the way you are. It tells you your risk of, addictions and depression or anxiety or entrepreneurial tendencies or empathy, or, there are a lot of different things that you can learn about yourself. And then it gives you a gene table that looks at what genes did you actually inherit, which ones do you have homozygous variants in, which one do you have hetero, and which ones did you get the normal code for that enzyme. So there's a lot of research that can be done on that first report. Then we have 4 other reports. The second one is a diet and lifestyle. So what foods you should stay away from, which foods are good for you, lifestyle kind of suggestions. And then we do a health report. Are you susceptible to autoimmune, cardiovascular, infections? There's a whole list of different health conditions, cognitive decline or Alzheimer's and those kind of things. You can see what your risks are. And the good news is, I know a lot of people are like, I don't want to know, but the good news is we can do something about it. If you know ahead of time, oh boy, going into old age, looks like I could head down that road. There are some things you can do to prevent that, which is what we're about as well. And then we look at the biochemical pathways. There's the 4th report. And then the 5th report is your supplement report. And that's done after you take a symptom questionnaire. So you fill out this questionnaire and say, I have these symptoms. And then, the software kind of calculates, oh, you have this gene, this biochemical pathway is impaired, and you have the symptom. And so it calculates all of that and then gives you supplement recommendations. Those last 3, though, have to be done with a practitioner because we want to make sure that you're protected and it's not going to interfere with anything you're already doing. If you're on medications and you start doing supplementation that could interfere with that could be a problem. And so we want to make sure people are safe to do the recommended supplementations. And so we have over 500 practitioners that have taken some training on the genetic reports and analysis that can support people with that. And they're all over the country. So that's cool.
Outside of US as well?
Yes, we do. Actually, yeah. We have some in Canada. We have some in Australia. It's starting to grow a little bit outside. Not a whole lot, but there are a few, yeah.
And let's say if you select one of them, are you able to, do you have to do it in person, or can you do?
You can do telehealth. Yeah, there are a bunch of them on our website that do telehealth.
Okay.
So you can do it in, over a Zoom or whatever.
Yeah. And how do you take this test?
It's a swab. So you just in here on the cheek, kind of rub in there and get it, and then stick it in a tube and send it back. So it's super easy.
Yeah, I'll have all the info, the links, and everything in the description available for everybody if they're interested. Any last word? Any last recommendation? Any last insight into our health?
Yeah, I just want to bring it back to the concept of compassion for yourself. If you're kind of beating yourself up because you're anxious or irritable or depressed and you think it's your fault, or, at least for me, I had this story about, I was depressed because, some things that happened in my past that weren't good. And it really wasn't true. Once I got my biochemistry balanced, I was able to look at those past events and go, well, okay, that was bad, but it's not who I am. So kind of looking at yourself through a compassionate lens, like you might have certain genetic variants that are influencing how you think and how you are, and your moods, and your even with weight gain and fatigue that could be coming from certain genetic variants. And so, we have a tendency to just beat ourselves up. The shame and guilt are debilitating on top of what we're already suffering from. So I would just encourage you to give yourself a break on that and try to think of it in terms of, oh, wow, this may not be your fault, that there may be underlying genetic variants that are influencing you and why you are the way you are.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. And it just to touch on that, personally, I haven't shared with anybody, but I grew up with trauma, and lots of things happened, especially in my childhood era and up to, I would say, 18 years of age. And I carried all that trauma with me over the years, and I think it was maybe 10 years ago or so. I think what I did, as you mentioned, I started forgiving myself for going through those experiences, going through all that, and forgiveness gave me that freedom. It released me and allowed me to actually think straight and breathe and just focus on the future. And I think that was, for me, was the forgiveness that I let go of those, and I said, you know what, I'm not gonna allow them to linger in my mind forever and ever, and allow that to make me be trapped in a bubble that doesn't allow me to live a normal life. One of them was just being in front of camera and filming videos for, let's say, video training lessons, or just speaking in public or anything like that. That was very traumatic for me. But as soon as I let go of that and forgave myself, I was free. I could talk. I can talk to anybody, and I can be in front of 10,000 people, and I don't have that fear anymore. I think so. Forgiveness is also, it's a good way of letting go of the past and all the trauma. And
that's awesome.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for enlightening us and giving us all these important yet unique information that I think nobody else is talking about it. So I'm glad that I came across you. I got to know you and had the opportunity to talk to you and dive into this topic in deeper level. So if people want to learn more about you and what you do and what you offer, where can they go?
Yeah, thank you, Saro. I appreciate your tracking me down and inviting me on your show. You can go to myhappygenes.com and just take a look. There's a lot of information on the website. You can look at sample reports. You can download an ebook and kind of educate yourself and see if this is something that you might be interested in. So again, I appreciate you. Thanks for sharing what you shared. I think that's really great, a great attitude that you have. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being our guest and also helping us in this area. If there are any questions, I'll ask everybody to ask those questions in the comments area. And as soon as this video is ready and everybody is able to watch it, and if there are any questions, I'll ask Dr. J to chip in and answer those questions. If I'm not able to, obviously, I don't think I'm going to be able to answer, but I'll ask Dr. J to answer them. And as soon as everything is ready, I'll let everybody know. Thank you very much for being here, Dr. J, and appreciate your time. I'll see you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Saro.